Amara was like any other university student. Her days were filled with lectures that stretched on too long, nights spent under the harsh glow of a desk lamp, and mornings fueled by too much coffee and too little sleep. To anyone who knew her, she seemed content, hardworking, reliable, and determined to carve out a future for herself. But beneath the surface, there was something else, a restlessness she couldn't shake, a feeling that life, as she knew it, was too predictable, too mundane. She often found herself questioning, is this all there is? Am I missing something greater? There are people out there not doing as much as I am and have things going well. Amara carried a quiet ache, a longing for something she couldn't quite name. Adventure, perhaps, or escape. A chance to break free from the routine that seemed to define her existence. But with that longing came doubt. Could she ever be more than what she was? Was she brave enough to step into the unknown? Her friends often described her as grounded, dependable. But Amara felt untethered, drifting between the life she had and the life she wanted. It was this quiet yearning, this relentless curiosity, that led her down a path she could never have imagined. A path where dreams collided with nightmares, where every choice carried a consequence she couldn't foresee. That night, Amara wasn't searching for trouble. But trouble has a way of finding those who seek something more. He called himself Dolly. His voice was smooth, his words carefully chosen, like a melody designed to draw you in. There was something about him that Amara couldn't quite place. His smile was warm, but his eyes held secrets she dared not question. In that moment, reason slipped away. Curiosity took its place. He invited her to his home. Against her better judgment, she agreed. There was no explanation for her decision, only a pull, a gravity that seemed to emanate from him. As they walked together, the city around them seemed to fade into obscurity. The streets grew quieter, darker. And then they arrived. The house was enormous, its ceilings high, its halls long and empty. Yet, it felt devoid of life. No housekeepers, no sounds of the living, just silence. An oppressive silence that clung to the air like a shroud. Something wasn't right. Amara felt it, but her feet carried her forward. There were things she couldn't explain. An earthy, musky scent that seemed to follow her every step. The faint shimmer of something on the floor, something that looked like scales. And his words, cryptic, calculated, as if he was speaking in riddles meant to keep her distracted, to keep her from asking the wrong questions. And yet, she stayed. She didn't know why. Perhaps it was fear or fascination. But the deeper she ventured into that house, the more it felt like the walls themselves were alive, closing in around her. Amongst all this, all she could think of was that he might be the channel for the life she always wanted outside her regular routine. As time went by, Dolly's demeanor changed. The intensity in his eyes softened, replaced by a charm that was almost disarming. He spoke to her in a low, soothing voice, each word carefully chosen to peel away the layers of her doubt. He told her stories of faraway places, of adventures he had lived, of a life filled with mystery and wonder. His voice wrapped around her like a blanket, coaxing her to lower her guard. He made her laugh, just a little at first. It felt strange, almost out of place, but it was comforting. The room that had once felt so oppressive now seemed warm, inviting. She found herself leaning into his words, captivated by the way he spoke, as though he had known her for years. He told her she was different, special in ways she didn't even realize. The air between them grew heavier, charged with an unspoken tension. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. He spoke of beauty, of desire, of the magic that comes when two souls connect in ways that defy explanation. Amara felt herself drawn in, unable, or perhaps unwilling, to resist the gravity of his presence. Then, as if to seal the moment, Dolly brought out a bag, a small, unassuming thing. But when he opened it, Amara's breath caught in her throat. Inside were stacks of money, more than she had ever seen in her life. He smiled, his gaze unwavering, and slid it across the table toward her. "Take it," he said. "You deserve this." His words were simple, but they carried weight. Amara's mind raced. Why was he giving her this? What did he want in return? But the way he spoke, the way he looked at her, it made her believe, for just a moment, that it was genuine. That this was his way of showing her a world she'd only dreamed of. The room felt different now. The shadows didn't seem as dark, the air not as heavy. Dolly had a way of making her forget her fears, even if just for a little while. And in that moment, with the bag of money between them and his eyes fixed on hers, she almost believed that everything was exactly as it seemed. She couldn't wait to get home to discuss the whole situation with her bestie. The night seemed to stretch endlessly, the outside world fading into irrelevance. They sat together, side by side, watching a film neither of them was truly paying attention to. Dolly's arm rested lightly around her shoulders, his touch almost imperceptible at first. But as the minutes passed, Amara felt her defenses slipping away. It was as if the quiet hum of the movie, the flickering light, and the steady rhythm of his breath were working together to weave a spell around her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this close to someone. There was something so effortless about the way he held her, the way he seemed to understand her without needing words. And when he turned to look at her, his gaze steady and inviting, she felt a spark she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. Slowly, cautiously, she leaned in, and their lips met. What began as a simple kiss grew deeper, more urgent. The tension that had been simmering between them all evening spilled over, and suddenly, nothing else mattered. They moved together like they'd known each other forever, the barriers between them dissolving. The world outside ceased to exist as they gave in to the moment. It was as though time had stopped. Every touch, every whispered word felt deliberate, electric. Amara couldn't recall ever feeling this alive, this wanted. For the first time in what felt like forever, she let herself go, surrendering to the moment, to him. But just as the moment reached its peak, Dolly paused. His smile remained as he leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'll be right back," he said, his voice low and steady. "Just need to use the restroom." Amara knew something was wrong. She could feel it in the air, in the weight of the silence that now seemed to press down on her chest. She had this undeniable urge to leave, to walk out the door and never look back. But as she sat there, staring at the empty hallway, her body refused to obey. She tried to move, to stand, but it was as though her limbs were paralyzed. She could feel the cold sweat on her palms, the rapid beat of her heart, but her body was no longer hers to control. She was conscious, aware of everything around her, but unable to lift a finger. Her mind screamed at her to act, to get up and run, but her body stayed rooted to the spot, frozen by an invisible force she couldn't understand. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her pulse racing with each passing second. It was as though time had slowed, the silence stretching on endlessly. The only sound now was the faint echo of running water, and then nothing. Then the water stopped. The sudden silence felt oppressive, suffocating. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears. It was too quiet, far too quiet. She waited, her eyes darting to the bathroom, half expecting him to return. But as the seconds dragged on, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Something had shifted. And then she saw it. A shadow, quick and fleeting, slithering across the floor. Her breath caught in her throat as the sound of a hiss, low and guttural, reached her ears. She turned toward the corner of the room, her pulse quickening, her eyes strained to see in the dim light. But there was nothing there. Just the flicker of the television and the suffocating silence. She wasn't imagining it. The hiss was real. And the shadow, she could have sworn it moved like a snake. But it couldn't be. She must have been imagining things. The tension, the unease. Perhaps it was all in her head. Or was it? The room felt colder now, and the sense of dread thickened. She could feel something watching her, something waiting. But what was it? What had she gotten herself into? As she sat there, frozen and vulnerable, the door to the bathroom creaked open slowly, just a crack. But what Dolly revealed next made Amara pray for the ground to open up and swallow her. The truth behind the man she had followed into that house was far darker than she could have ever imagined. And in that moment, Amara realized she wasn't alone in that room, not in the way she thought. In that moment, Amara was paralyzed with fear. The creature before her was not just a snake. It was Kai, the man she had trusted, the man who had lulled her into a false sense of safety. But now, he was something far darker, something far more dangerous. His true form, slithering, monstrous, revealed the terrifying truth she had been too blind to see. She couldn't move. She couldn't scream. The creature seemed to sense her fear, drawing closer, its cold, smooth skin brushing against her trembling legs. Then, as if to mock her helplessness, the snake released a thick, white substance that dripped slowly onto her body. The air grew thick with the stench of it, sickly sweet, but suffocating. Amara's mind was racing, but her body still refused to obey. The terror that gripped her was all-consuming. But then, as the snake disappeared into the shadows of the bathroom, something inside her snapped. The paralysis began to fade, the hold on her body loosening as the rush of adrenaline flooded her system. With a burst of energy fueled by raw panic, Amara regained control of her body. She tore herself free from the paralysis, her legs trembling as she staggered to her feet. Fear, pain, and confusion all tangled together, but there was only one thing she could focus on now: survival. With the remnants of her dignity torn and her body bruised, Amara fled into the night with the bag of money given to her. She didn't look back, her mind consumed by the horror she had witnessed. The world she once knew, the safety of her university, her life, now felt like a distant memory, and all that remained were the echoes of a man who was never truly human at all. Would you have stayed? Or would you have walked away? When faced with the unimaginable, with a person who seemed trustworthy but turned out to be something else entirely, what would you have done? Would you have kept your composure? Or would fear have taken over, as it did for Amara? Where would you head to if you found yourself in a situation like hers? Would you run into the unknown? Or would you stay and face what could be your worst nightmare? Would you trust your instincts? Or would you risk it all, hoping for a way out? The answers to these questions are not as simple as they seem. Because when you find yourself trapped in a web of deception, it's not just your body that's at risk. It's your mind, your very soul. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. What would you do in Amara's shoes? How would you react to the unthinkable? Let's keep this conversation going. If you enjoyed this story, if it kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to share this video with your friends. Let them in on the mystery. And if you want more spine-tingling stories like this one, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Did Amara survive the hurdle? Watch out.